Okay, Bob and Richard, you can see our screen, correct?
I can see
We
the
see,
agenda.
you're
Yeah,
sharing your agenda screen.
Yes, thank you. The camera's not working unfortunately, so you won't be able to see in the room, but you will be able to see the screen and hear everybody.
That is correct.
sounds fine. Thank you.
Can you hear me? This is Bonnie.
Bonnie, you're gonna have to really articulate.
Okay, I was just saying, we can see your lovely faces up there.
Okay, and now we can hear you, Bonnie, so
All
we're
right,
good.
I'm screaming into the microphone.
I love it. It's perfect.
Welcome to the planning board meeting of July 20th, 2022. I'll do roll call first. Alden Clark.
Here.
Beth DeLeo. Here. Bob Cow.
Here,
Jamie Pennington is absent. Heather Rogers. Here. Rick Tainter. Here. Richard Yeager.
Here,
Don Walters is absent. Bonnie Sontag here. Is Linda logged in?
I do not see her at the moment.
Okay. So Beth and anybody else who wants to take notes and share them with me afterward, we'll write up the notes from tonight. Andy Port is also here from Planning and the Development Office. The agenda. We had a change to the agenda. So the first item is the approval not required for Pine Street. Then request for minor modification at 13 Doyle Drive, followed by a request for a minor modification at 25 Duffy Drive, and an informal discussion pre-application about Market Landing Park expansion. We have several minutes to approve, and then updates from the chair or the planning director. So we'll move into the first item, which is approval not required for 6 to 14 Pine Street, and Andy's going to explain it to us.
Sure, the applicant isn't here this evening, so I'm just giving a brief overview. These are pretty standard. We have two property owners who are splitting some of the rear yard. This one you may be familiar with. You actually approved or endorsed this plan several months ago, but they wanted to make a slight tweak to it. So where you see this back line right here, they're making a very slight tweak to that line. Just going to zoom in on that. This very slight adjustment right here, just to accommodate this feature here. So that's all they're doing, is to change that alignment from the plan that it was as it was previously aligned. And the office recommends endorsement of the plan.
Any questions or comments? Take the motion to approve.
To endorse.
Oh, to endorse, sorry.
And I move to endorse the plan. Second.
Okay, I'll call roll. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
yes,
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Richard. Hello, Richard.
I muted myself. Yes, sorry. Yes.
Okay, Bonnie, yes. So that's endorsed and good to go. Now, request for minor modification at 13 Doyle Drive. We don't have anybody here representing the applicant. They were going to show up tonight, right?
Correct. I believe they're online. Vincent,
Yeah.
do you want to address the board? I can pull up the plan and any other visuals that we have that you've submitted.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, so let me actually just start with the context of the subdivision, just so everybody knows where, what lot it is that we're talking about. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, we have to talk very close
Yes.
to these microphones. So this is the plan of the OSRD Colby Farm Lane. I'm just zoomed in here to the lots that are for development purposes, not the open space surrounding it, which you can see at the bottom. The lot in question is actually this lot right here. So we'll be taking a look at the layout of that one in just a moment. I'm just going to switch to that. And then Vincent, did you want to give from this plan here of your lot, you just give an overview of what you'd like to do for the board?
Yeah, so the kind of rectangular yellow figure right there. We're looking to put in it's like essentially a plunge pool. It's kind of small on that, but it's 13 feet long, 7 feet wide. It's within setbacks, and it's just going to be kind of set off from the side of our deck, which you can see on the plan there. It's 3 feet into the ground, so it's really more of a, I guess you'd call it like a glorified hot tub. That's a little nicer.
Sorry, I was just looking for I thought there was a graphic that you had submitted. No?
We did.
Sorry, got a crying baby here.
No, that's quite right. Actually just looking, because I thought that you had actually submitted a rendering, and I thought we had that here.
We did, yeah. I could try to,
On our, whatever we uploaded.
I can look for
Yeah.
it again, Andy, if you need us to try to resend it.
That's right. I'm not seeing it here.
Okay. Yeah, so essentially, essentially within the setbacks, we're just looking to put in this, and our HOA has approved it. I believe, yeah, Dave Daly, who's a developer who still has the open permit, has co-signed it as a minor modification. So we're just looking for approval to be able to put that in, if at all possible.
Thank you. And for the board, as we mentioned, the staff report, part of the reason the applicant's here before you is because with these smaller lots in the OSRDs, the applicants are looking essentially for a waiver here of elements that might be placed within the 100 feet of the wetland resource area. That goes back to one of the provisions in the zoning ordinance. So the board just has to review and approve that. I did have an exchange with the conservation administrator, and it's our understanding that the commission, although it hasn't formally approved this yet, she does not anticipate the commission having any issues with this. In fact, what the issue that was attempted to be resolved in the prior weeks leading up to now, and Vincent knows this because he's been waiting, he's on hold a little bit, is that Daley's been finishing some punch list issues. And so Daley had agreed to add this, sign on to this and add it in reference to their open permits. And that way we would not have any open overlapping permits between the owners of this lot and the developer who's still completing their punch list. So that being said, the Conservation Commission is expected to review and approve the same plan that you see here.
Could you clarify on the diagram where the 100 feet back from the wetland buffer area line is?
Sure. So sorry. Yeah. So this distance right here, that is 100 feet from the wetland, which is down here. To the rear of the lot,
There's a 100-foot marker right near the shed. What's that?
That's showing that line going up to the floor. Distance from.
Oh, you're talking about this line right here?
No, I just saw 100 feet.
That 100 feet is labeling this line though. This,
Oh, so that's the 100 foot from the wetland.
yeah,
So the pool is right on the edge of that.
sorry. I tried to just grab something and I couldn't do it. Yeah, so if you look, it's just labeling that line right there.
But where the pool is, it does require a waiver.
Correct.
Okay, so before us, we have to decide if this is minor. And if it's minor, we deal with it tonight. We have to decide if we approve the waiver, and we put a condition in that it has to be all reviewed and approved by the Conservation Commission. With the pieces of it.
Andy, could you explain, or would the applicant explain why we're not, the last time we talked about this, we said we were going to see it after the Conservation Commission. So can you explain why, is there an urgency for us to deal with it, or when is the Conservation Commission going to act on this?
Sure. Well, I'll let Vincent speak from his end, online, but the bottom line, I guess, is that we've had some exchange over the last couple of months, probably at this point, with Vincent, Jennifer Blanchet, the zoning administrator, and the development team, all trying to work together here to resolve, because they have not closed out their punch list, on the subdivision, we did not want to have open overlapping permits where the parties could then be dispute over who's responsible for completing work and what's in compliance within the permit area or not. So the request several weeks ago or months ago, a month or so ago at this point, was postponed with the expectation that the commission would review and approve this and then advise the planning board that they were comfortable with it, at which point the planning board would approve. However, if you go back to the language of the ordinance, there's nothing that precludes the planning board from approving it conditional upon the Conservation Commission's approval. So that basically in sequence, the planning board could approve first, Conservation Commission afterwards. I think from the applicant's perspective, and Vincent can speak from this, on his end, but I think they're looking to expedite any of the sort of procedural aspects of this, so they can essentially get this structure in and taking advantage of some of the season maybe.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Andy. Yeah, so we've been trying to do this, I think, started since February, and I think we were held up because of the open permit, and we're not trying to put in a gigantic pool by any means, and we're trying to be within all the setbacks, within the all approvals and everything. Like I said, it's not a big pool. It's 13 feet long, 7 feet wide, so it really doesn't take up a lot of space in the yard. But it would be important to us and our family if we can get this going, because they've been waiting to have a pool again since the spring, and we would hate to keep pushing this off any further.
Just to clarify, I mean, even if we vote in favor of it, they can't do anything until the developer completes all the punch list items and gets a sign off from Conservation Commission.
No, well, again, I'll defer to the conservation administrator, but our understanding is that they would be able to proceed with this work now, but Daley would not be able to close out the punch list on their project without knowing that this work is in compliance. So effectively, Daley's agreed to allow to work with them or allow that work to proceed underneath the permit that they have. And I'll defer to the conservation administrator on that, but that's my understanding, talking with both Jennifer Blanchet, the zoning administrator, and the conservation administrator about this. They would need both approvals to proceed with the work, but the Daley is essentially taking this into account in their open permit.
Oh, maybe I didn't understand. So they do need the Conservation Commission to act on this.
That's-
before they do.
That's correct.
And so do we know, well, why, I guess it comes back to the question of maybe did the Conservation Commission not meet last month, or why is the Conservation Commission waiting for us?
Sure. Vincent, I don't know if you can answer that question. I've only attended one Conservation Commission recently meeting, so I don't know if you've talked with Julia about that scheduling.
No, we were told we had to go through this process first.
That's exactly.
And then we could just go down to conservation and have them kind of sign off on it. Where we are putting this in isn't a disturbed area already. I mean, this was all ripped up, this area, when this construction was going on. So we're not disturbing an area that hasn't been touched in a while either. So, but after, if we get this approval, our next step would be to go meet with conservation at at their office and look for approval there.
He may be confused because it's not just meeting at the office, right? Yeah, he has to go to the Conservation Commission.
Correct. Vincent, you're aware that the Conservation Commission is, their meetings are on Zoom these days, but you'd be attending one of their meetings.
Oh, okay.
When do those take place? Sorry, this is Michelle, I'm a homeowner here.
They
too.
take place on alternating Tuesday evenings.
Okay.
Okay.
So again, this is a follow-up you all want to do with Julia, so we can talk in the office tomorrow, but you want to follow up with Julia to make sure that you're on their agenda for the same. This is the.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. Like I said, we were told this was the order to go in. So that's the reason we wanted.
Yeah, we don't have Julia with us. It's quite possible that the suggestion there was that the planning board review to see whether or not it's substance that would be comfortable with it under the OSRD prior to the commission reviewing it under the order conditions, but I would defer to them on that.
Actually, I thought we already said, we were comfortable with it, that we had to go to Conservation first. So that was a couple months ago.
Yeah, all I can tell you is that we had talked about finding a way in which the planning board could approve first and the Conservation Commission possibly second. I don't know about the timeframe of the Conservation Commission. I'd have to defer to Vincent and Julia on any discussions they've had about their schedule. If you feel uncomfortable approving this here, you could defer it until after the Conservation Commission. What we were trying to do was to determine if there was a way for the planning board to review it. And this is where we came to. I'd have to defer to Vincent and just Julia on discussions they've had about timeframe or why this is not, previously.
I guess I don't want to bounce these people around, but I think they've been getting that advice somewhere. And because I think, we were pretty clear, the last time we looked at it is, let's wait till the Conservation Commission approves it and then come back to us. And I get what you're saying about, there's nothing that says we can't do it this way. But I believe the language of the ordinance that I have in front of me says the planning board shall do this with the advice of the Conservation Commission. We haven't got any advice from the Conservation Commission.
Understood. I can offer you the advice that I received from the Conservation Administrator, and I understand that's not the body. Yeah, you can sort of dismiss that. That's understandable. At any rate, I understand your concern. I'd have to defer to Vincent and Julia on why this was or was not on the last Conservation Commission agenda. I certainly had no objection to that being processed that way, but I do not know what discussions they've had. If they were told, again, like I said, possibly to come here and get the planning board's concurrence on the substance of it first, maybe that's what happened here, but.
Yeah, well, I'll speak up. I mean, honestly, from day one, we were told we cannot get in front of anybody because Daily has an open permits. And until that's closed out, we can't speak to anybody. Literally, we've been trying, we've sent everything in, we've done all of our due diligence. We are looking for anything to just move this along. And even if it's an approval subject to conservation approving it, it would just skip an extra step for us.
We've been waiting since February, and we're actually supposed to be on a meeting. And we were told that same day of that meeting that they've decided because he did have that open permit, they weren't gonna grant it. So we expected it, put a down payment on this at that time, and now have been dragged out for the past 5 months.
Yeah, guys, it's been a long thing that gets going on. I mean, what we were asking is if the board is okay with it, if conservation approves it, and then that we can move forward would be great. We prefer to go that route than have to continue to keep coming back into meetings.
This is Chair Bonnie Sontag. I'm not going to worry about the procedure. We're here tonight and we have it before us, and I think we should just vote on it and move it forward. And then the next part of the process is clearly between you folks and the Conservation Commission. If anything goes awry, this condition will be in there so that you would have to come back to us, but I doubt that's going to happen from the sounds of things. So
I appreciate
it. Really make it possible for you to move forward. And I wish we had done this back in February, but there was a different reading of the whole situation. And the advice I got from Julie at that time was to hold off. And she's obviously rethought it or worked some things out with Daily that none of us knows about. So it's okay. Let's just deal with what's in front of us tonight, and I'll ask board members if they'd like to comment further on the application itself.
So I'll make a comment. So looking at the standard for the waiver, in my opinion, I don't think that the standard's met. If we're going to grant a waiver, it needs to substantially further the goals of the OSRD section and otherwise be in the best interest of the community. And I don't think that is. No, I mean, within the 100-foot buffer, I don't know that if originally proposed, we would have said that this was good for the project or would have approved the project with a structure like this in that area. And so from what I gather looking at, a buffer area shall be provided and we can waive buffer requirements in certain circumstances, and it is if the waiver will substantially further the goals or otherwise be in the best interest of the community, and I don't see how waiving them in this case is. And I actually am concerned about the precedent for waiving the buffer requirements if we do so in this case.
I have another question. When this first came to us, we noticed that the shed had been constructed within the buffer without any prior approval.
I believe that's correct.
So is that going to be folded into this request to get the Conservation Commission's approval of the shed as well as the punch pool?
Yes, both of these would require that approval.
Yeah, we did apply for a permit for that shed So,
And that one.
yeah, so that was approved. So we didn't realize we had to go through any planning board approval for that, but we did go, got the correct permits for that, was approved for that, you know.
If I'm not mistaken, it's possible that that was signed off on, the zoning administrator might have signed off on the building permit for the shed.
Without going to the conservation commission.
Yeah, that's correct. And it may be, keep in mind that these OSRDs are somewhat limited in Newburyport, and we've had, as you can see later on the agenda, we have several of these things coming up. And this is the difficulty with OSRDs is the lots are given smaller size. The developer proposes smaller lot sizes. Makes it more difficult for folks to do things on them. You know, they're purchasing smaller lots, but when they want to do those things, that requires some exceptions. And that's part of the, you know, going back to the original approvals, that's why these things have to come back before the board, because the plans have limited that to some degree by granting waivers for the lot sizes. And the question here is that, you know, compile, you know, if that's compounded by each lot doing that, does that become a problem? Whether it be for the environment or the resource areas or just the massing and scale inside the development.
Yeah. And again, this is only, it's not like your normal pool. It's 3 feet in the grounds. It's not very large, and I believe it is within the 100 feet. So I think we're not looking to be building right on the conservation area or you know, anywhere that's going to disrupt that area. Yeah, and we do, you know.
We do also have an email from the town engineer saying that it would not disrupt stormwater management or anything like that.
Yeah, so we reached out and tried to just make sure we were covering all our bases when we were looking for approval of this.
This is that graphic I wasn't able to locate.
Oh, yeah.
This gives you an idea of the scale. Obviously, most of this is submerged.
Can I ask actually a follow-up question? I noticed that there was also going to be the addition of pavers and a fence. I'm just wondering if there are dimensions for if there's going to be a patio surrounding the pool.
Yeah, we're actually just going to do a little catwalk around it, which would probably be, I think it's 18 inches around of just like a pavers, just around the perimeter of the pool itself. And then we're going to be, so the pool actually comes with a cover with a lock, which we'll have on, but we're also putting a fence between us and the neighbor as well to be in compliance with just fencing for pools.
Is there lighting in the pool?
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Will there be lighting?
Yeah, we'll have yeah, we'll have just kind of little lights around it just for safety reasons and just ambient lighting at night. And then the actual soap pool itself, I believe, has a light in the pool as well.
Following up on Beth's question, so what is actually the amount of area that we're talking about? Was it 7 by 3 or was it, 13 by 7, or was it 13 by 7 plus 18 inches? All around?
Yeah, I was, well, 13 by 7 is the dimensions of the actual pool, and then pavers that will be a catwalk around it will be about 18 inches. So if yeah, so if you yeah, if you,
16 by 10.
yeah, I'd say that'd be safe. 160 square feet or less.
So with that additional 18 inches, is it still going to be, what is this setback requirement? Is the setback requirement, is 6 feet the setback requirement? And is that
From the lot line.
from the lot
Yeah.
line? And is that just the pool, or is it the pool plus the perimeter?
That's just the pool structure technically,
So
yeah.
they can go right up to the lot line.
With the pavers, sure, unless the planning board is conditioning it somehow.
And then clarify, please, where the fence is going to be? Is it
Yep, so we're actually, we're gonna split that cost with our neighbor. So it's gonna go right down the lot line, which you could sort of see, I believe it's that dark line on the, kind of to the left of the pool on the diagram here.
And it's gonna go the whole length of your property to the back?
Yep, it'll go all the way to the back fence and then it'll go halfway up and to, to where the, halfway up where the house is, then we'll cut over and we'll have a gate.
So it's partially across the back?
No, it'll be fully across the side. The back will have, we won't have anything along the back. We'll just, and then it's gonna cut over to the house.
And they need permission fence from conservation.
The fence installation, yeah, if it's going down towards the resource area, they're gonna need approval for that fence as well, but I assume that's gonna be shown on, Vincent, I assume that's gonna be shown on the plan for the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, we'll put that on there.
But it's not shown on that.
That's correct. It's not shown here, no. I do know that the applicant has spoken with Jennifer and with Caitlin, and I had asked, obviously for a plan that shows sufficiently, obviously, this is what resulted from that discussion they had about a plan of the improvements.
Let me try with a motion.
Well, are there other people who want to speak? I don't want to just limit it to us. Richard, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I've been
And
listening
Bob?
intently.
Nothing to add, Bonnie. No.
So I'll make this motion and we'll see where it goes. So the motion is to consider the request for modification minor, to approve said minor modification request and waiver request for 13 Doyle Drive pursuant to the Newburyport zoning ordinance section 14J822 with the condition that no swimming pool permit shall be issued until the Conservation Commission approves a certificate of compliance for the original OSRD subdivision. And also, so actually, I thought this was saying the opposite of what you were saying. Sorry, I interrupted. It says no permits can be issued until they comply with all the conditions.
That is the language that was suggested in the staff report.
Well, let's keep it in there.
Yeah, okay. So approves the certificate of compliance for the original OSRD subdivision and also approves the instant waiver request to build a pool with 13 Doyle Drive within the 100-foot wetland buffer of this OSRD. And I was going to add the words, provided that the Conservation Commission votes to recommend the waiver and provided that there should be no further construction in the 100-foot buffer. But I guess that gets away from the fence. They have to apply for the fence. To us.
Am I mistaken? We could perhaps include verbiage in the approval referencing a fence on that lot line. It's up to you.
Okay, I'll go backwards.
I need the extra language.
Yep. Well, I'll say.
Yeah,
Consider the request for modification minor and approve said minor modification request and waiver request for 13 Doyle Drive pursuant to the Newburyport zoning ordinance section 14J822. And to include a fence along the property line with
Southern side, the southern.
the southerly property line, with the condition that no swimming pool permit or fence permit shall be issued until the Conservation Commission approves a certificate of compliance for the original OSRD subdivision and also approves the instant waiver request to build the pool at 13 Doyle Drive within the 100-foot wetland buffer area of this OSRD. Provided that the Conservation Commission votes to recommend the waiver. Said Conservation Commission approval shall be submitted as part of the swimming pool permit application.
So you added provided the Conservation commission vote to approve this condition.
Recommend the waiver. Votes recommend the waiver.
That's new.
Yes,
So the two new pieces.
the fence
Yeah.
and that.
Okay, that's the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All right, we're going to take a vote. Alden,
Yes.
Beth? No. Bob?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Heather? Yes. Rick?
Yes,
Richard?
No,
Got a no?
that's a no.
We need 6. No, it's a minor, so we only need 5.
I would argue that the original special permit threshold applies.
We need 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't have it. I'm saying no as well.
we want to. In terms of procedure, do we want to leave it with a? Can we have another vote to? They can't come back, right? If they voted no.
No, that's a minor modification. They can come back. Yeah, I guess the question here is if there's any guidance that could be given to the applicant for things that might make it more palatable, whether it be location or changes in any form, whether or not the applicant could perhaps return to a future meeting to tweak this somehow, if it's an
Quite
impasse.
honestly, we would like the advice of the Conservation Commission. Because we're assuming that at least I made the decision and I heard from Beth as well, that this is in the buffer zone. And along with that, setting precedent. I'm 100% with Beth on that. Richard, do you want to say anything to why you voted no?
No, I concur about setting precedent, but to recommend to the applicant, is there no consideration for being able to do this without encroaching on the buffer zone? I'm just looking at this site plan. I don't have much to go on, but wondering if there's adjacent, to the deck, if you will, to the right. I hate to play designer, but it just seems like there's maybe an opportunity without encroaching on the buffer zone and tripping all these wires.
There's no wires there? I'm
No, there's-
confused. There's no wires. I guess,
All right, that's a
I guess I
euphemism.
would like to know the concern about the
That-
environment or whatever the
That's a
real question is.
euphemism. Excuse me, that's a euphemism, meaning is
Okay.
there a way to place it without encroaching on the buffer zone? Simple as that.
No. We've looked at all the areas. I guess, what are the concerns? I'd like to know the environmental concerns, what the actual concerns are. I'd like a list of them.
Yes, that's so would we. We are concerned because we are not experts on this. And we
Okay.
want to have the advice of the Conservation Commission. Because
So you're
basically
concerned about a
saying-
3-foot deep hole in our yard?
Look, we don't have any more information than you do about the environmental impacts.
Okay,
We want to make the right decision because this is the kind of decision that can set precedent for other applicants who say, oh, you let them go into the buffer zone. Now you're saying we can't do that. So we are not the experts
okay,
on the environmental impact of building in a significantly disturbing land in the buffer area. So we would like you to go to the Conservation Commission and get their approval first, which is what we had agreed to do back in whenever it was you first put in this application to us. And we would just feel a whole lot more comfortable moving forward with their expertise, telling us what's the right thing to do here.
well, I'd just like to point out that that was never made clear to us.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay, well, it's been 5 months and it was never made clear to us within that 5 months. I will go to conservation, but I will voice my concerns to certain people about this.
Good.
Thank you. Have a great night.
So we'll move on to the next application on our general business, which is a request for a minor modification at 25 Duffy Drive. And we have the applicant with us, who's been very patiently waiting. Thank you so much. Just a moment. Andy, is the mic on up there so you can speak into it?
Yes, if you speak in the mic, that should be working.
Yes, you're on. Go for it. So you are
David Green from 25 Duffy Drive.
wonderful. Tell us what you want to do.
Well, we are looking existing patio we have in the backyard. We wanted to put in a 14-foot by 14-foot hexagon shaped pavilion. And once again, it's on an existing patio area. And that's pretty much a basic picture what he's got there, except ours would have 6 posts with the hexagon. Would be one leader in there, it's not showing me it's drawn, but anyway, it'd be 14 by 14, so it's a little bit less than 200 square feet. And from what I was told, that's the picture, it would go right over where that rounded area is, basically right in there. It fits, it would fit right in there without adding or doing anything different to that. And that was the way it was when we moved into the house, when we bought the house, which you saw in the picture. And I guess the concern was that there was roof lot coverage or roof space or something of that nature. And so we're just deciding now if we can get approved for the pavilion as requested, or if not, we would like to put in a pergola, which wouldn't have a roof. And I've got the information on that also. If you look at the shape, it would be a rectangular shape. And it would also be placed in that exact same area. I'm not sure what's on
Can you
these.
distinguish between the two structures you're proposing?
One is a pavilion, so there's no floor. It would be mounted right directly on top of that. They would drill holes and put post holes into the existing area there. And there would be 6 post holes holding up the pavilion that would have a roof on it. The pergola would be we're looking at probably a 12-foot by 16-foot. It's on that drawing right there. And that would have 4 poles, which again would go in the same area, but would have an open roof style. You know, I believe there's, yeah, there you go. It would look like that as opposed to an actual roof. And to my knowledge, the roof space itself was the concern. We have a kind of a ranch style house, so I think for our lot size, there's already quite a bit of roof space taken up. There's something about 25% that either Jennifer or Caitlin mentioned. And then they got back to me the other day and said, well, with this 5% overage, maybe the board can take a look at it and see what you folks think. So I guess I'm here just to find out what you may approve. Ideally, we'd like the pavilion. If not, the pergola would be fine. And no, I'm not going to ask for a pool.
You're not in a buffer area. Okay. Comments from anybody? Question?
This is a question maybe for Andy. So when reading the staff report, it sounds like it's well under the 503 square feet. It's listed here. Is that the same thing as the 5%?
It's within that.
What is the 503 square? Where does that come from? 500. It says that 500 square feet of additional impervious material is permitted for the HOA document. And so I'm wondering where that 503.
Oh, yeah, sorry. There was a spreadsheet provided to the zoning administrator. This is going back some time, and I don't recall whether you were.
So this is the 5%.
This is within that. This is that 5%. Right, that- yeah. Yeah.
So that this structure with a roof is less than the 500.
That five,
Okay.
right.
And so it's also less than 5%. So,
Right.
so this change is allowable for the HOA document.
Which the planning board had previously approved, yes.
Thank you.
And in fact, if it was just the cover, that would not be something that has to come before the planning board. Here, it's because the structure itself is creating more massing,
More impervious.
more impervious, right?
I think it is, yeah. So just a question then maybe for Andy as well. Given that if we look at the structure with the roof, and the concern over the runoff from that, isn't that just going on to the patio?
It is effectively the same water. So I guess, that's why I mentioned the massing consideration, because again, these are OSRDs, smaller lots, tighter neighborhoods. This one may be less of a tight OSRD than say Oleo Woods or the Colby Farm one in some senses, but because of that, it's not just the coverage and yes, that water is just going to flow right off the roof into the ground, as it would in the grass or the patio.
So it's going to be on the patio the same as if the roof wasn't there.
Correct.
If I understand Andy correctly, he wants us to look at sort of the massiveness of it, the aesthetics of one structure versus another, or none at all. If you're gonna thank everybody, and please comment. If you have a preference for either or none. Richard, can I go to you and ask for your comments?
I believe it meets the criteria and I would endorse approving
For which structure?
the more simplified structure if possible. The second sketch that we saw.
Okay, the second option, the
Pergola.
pergola rather than the pavilion, and you're right.
Correct. Yeah, it's more in keeping, so.
It's more, I'm sorry, it's very hard to hear you.
In keeping with the design intent, but
Got it.
we have limited to what we can react to, so it's a best decision based on the material in front of us. That image has more compelling. The simple pergola.
Okay. Bob, do you have any comments?
No additional comments, Bonnie. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also a view looking the other way, is there not? Yeah.
Yeah, there's nobody to the left of us, nobody behind us. We're on the, I'm sure you're familiar with the area, the old golf course there. So that's all the open, our yard goes back well beyond where that patio ended. Not well beyond, but another 10 feet beyond that. So we're not anywhere near the border, if you will. That's me right there.
Obviously during construction,
That'd
but
be a water letter from the person on the, on the bike side. Sorry.
Can I just ask for the height of each? Is the pergola measured? How is the pergola measured? And the other structure. So the pergola is 9 feet. And what was the height of the?
And the pavilion would be, basically the same ceiling height, but then where you saw that dome roof, I guess they call it, would be about 11 and a half, 12 feet.
The pavilion's gonna feel bigger. It's gonna have a much greater presence, if you will, less not transparent. What's the word I'm looking for, Bob?
Well, here,
Let's open.
Less open. There we
Yep.
go. Thank you, Bob.
Can you go back to the pavilion so I can see Can you see the dimensions of the basement? Very, very close.
Let's see, what's that?
One up on the top is really good.
I'm sort of leaning toward what Richard was saying, that the impact of the roof structure and all the, I don't know the right term for it, but all the structure of the whole thing is much more significant. Trying not to find a pejorative word, but in comparison to the trellis, what I'm calling it a trellis, the pergola is open, you can have plantings over it and so on. And while it might cover the same amount of space, visually, it feels more in keeping with the open space around there and your house. So I'm leaning in that direction. If you're saying one or the other is okay with you.
But
Well, we
Bonnie-
really wanted the pavilion, it's not that one or the other was, basically, we put in for the pavilion and going back and forth with Jennifer and, I think Diane, I believe it was, and Caitlin, they recommended that, we still give it a try because that's what we wanted, but she said one time that they weren't going to approve it. And then they found this zoning information that we just mentioned, and I had no idea what was, didn't even know about that. I wish we would have found that out a month ago when I first started asking for the permit. But, it all kind of got changed up and they were hemming and hawing and saying, well, the pavilion might not work. So it really, we would prefer the pavilion. That's all.
Richard, I hear you want to speak again.
just to comment and add to what you had just provided, the pavilion has a sense of formality and ornateness, which I don't think is in keeping. If you were to bring up the existing photographs of the home and the patio, the trellis offers a little more informality and a little more open, and I think is more in keeping with the adjacent structure. I don't know if you want to share the photograph.
Yeah, that captures what I was struggling with. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, we mainly wanted it, for a shade thing in the back, to have some shade back there. So one of these things, we could get those screens that close up.
Sure.
So,
That would be a
I mean, it's
flat
fine. I just want here to get the approval for one or the other.
And so part of the discussion here is about adding impervious coverage. But if it were the pergola, would they still need the minor modification for the unroofed structure of the pergola?
I'm not convinced that that is necessarily needed here. Again, I defer to the zoning administrator, but I think your inclination is correct that it is a precautionary measure. I think it might be beneficial to prove, but to your point, I think technically speaking, probably not because it's not enclosed.
But so the mission is not so much for accessory structure as it is for a covered accessory structure.
Correct.
And I'd just like to just add one more thing, just for your information. If you were to do the pergola, that doesn't count against the 503 square feet that you're allowed to add to your property under the homeowner association. So if you ever wanted to do something else on your lot, like a punch pool.
Dare ask us.
Then you'd be able to do it.
I understand.
Just to add, from my point of view, I think the pavilion, the way it's situated on the patio, closer to the house and with the open space around, I'm not that concerned with the massing of that. I think be more associated with the house and blended with the house when you see it from the other areas, the open areas and so forth. So I'm not that concerned about the massing.
Nobody will see it, unless they're literally in our
Right. So when we make the motion, we have to know which structure we're making it for. Let's start with the pavilion because that's the applicant's preference. I don't know if it specifies that in this wording here.
We can assume the planning board
would
would.
specify that,
Yep.
just add it in. What is the two motions?
One, preferred minor modification. the other.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's just have a motion. Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to consider the request for minor modification minor.
I'll second.
Writing and thinking and calling names. Yeah. Don't get, gotta get up at 6 in the morning to do all these notes. Okay, so the motion is to consider this a minor modification. And I'll take a roll on that. Alden,
Yes.
Bev,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes,
Bonnie, yes. So we keep it in here with us, and now we make decision on what we are going to approve as a structure. And the applicant's preference is to go for the pavilion first with the roof on it. So I'll take a motion to that effect, that the motion is to approve the minor modification request for a pavilion.
And just to clarify, if this motion doesn't carry, then we can move on to the second.
Correct.
So I will make a motion to approve the minor modification request for 25 Duffy Drive with the pavilion.
Second.
Okay, so this is with the pavilion. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Richard,
no,
and Bonnie, no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops. Is it make it? Oh, no, 5 for a minor. No, we're gonna go
You're saying the
OSRD.
special
Well, keep in mind, this is part of the special permit, so.
We need 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You only got 1.
I would like to make a motion to approve the minor modification request for 25 Duffy Drive for the pavilion. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so that's Rick.
I'll second.
Just a question, do we want to consider continuing this until there's more members present?
I don't, that's a risky business because people are getting sick all the time, unless you want to do that. You want to hold off until we have other board members here?
There will be another month yet, or?
Yeah, because we're not meeting the first week in August. You want to move forward, okay. So, pergola, motion is Rick, and Beth is the second. And let's do another roll call. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Richard,
yes,
yes, Bonnie, yes. You got yourself a pergola.
When are you installing?
So this will get, it has to be signed and recorded first, right, Andy, before they can pull a permit?
Yeah, we can take care of this very quickly, of course, but we'll get that, we'll look at the formality of the certificate here signed. And that way it can pass on to the zoning administrator and the building commissioner.
So where do I do that?
You'd want to follow up with Caitlin tomorrow morning. Yeah, she's the one that's going to, we'll follow up on the language here, but she's going to be printing that out and having that signed and filed. Yep. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Would you like to join the planning board?
Actually, no, I kind of like semi-retired, you need to volunteer work.
You might do. I need them in the, I'll be in touch.
Jack of all trades, master of none. I got a big hammer in my bucket.
I'll follow up with you. I don't know why I did that. You just look like an interested person.
Well, I am, very curious, and who knows?
I never do this. I must be slapshot or something. Yeah, I'm shameless.
So we're, also have a great folks.
Thank you.
Folks.
Stay cool. All right, where are we on the agenda? We have market landing. Are we entering our informal now? Market Landing Park expansion. Andy, do you have any of your colleagues?
I do, thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm wearing two hats here. In this case, I'm the project manager for the Market Landing Park project. So I'm presenting this with some folks that we have from Sasaki. I just wanted to announce them and if they could just introduce themselves. Actually, Maren, do you want to just give a round of introduction for your team and I can just let you do that?
Sure. My name is Maren Braco. I'm a landscape architect and project manager at Sasaki. And today I have with me Dan Dwyer, who's the architect working on the visitor center. Mark Dawson is the principal in charge. Jamie Villette is our civil engineer, and Stephanie Krull is our consultant from VHB working on permitting.
May I interrupt for one moment? Andy, I have a procedural question. We're having so much trouble hearing. The next meeting, our second meeting in August is when we're supposed to do a completeness vote on the application. Could we combine that with the informal? I know it's, or it may push things out a little bit. I don't know how we're going to hear her or any of them tonight.
Well, again, I don't know how to speak to the owl issues because those are, they come and go, or it just works and then all of a sudden it doesn't. You know, we've had 2 times now it hasn't. The part of the reason that it's a long story, it's hard to explain, but as project managers, one of the things that Jordy and I, for those of you who know Jordy, one of the things we have to deal with is the constantly, there's a million different moving pieces that have to be juggled. And so when we push out the informal, we have to push out the finalization of plans, materials are being presented because we don't know whether or not things are going to be changing, whether or not there's any substantive input that might modify those things. There's been a fair amount of development. One of the things we're going to review with you is a fair amount of development of the plans already, working very closely with the city council and their ad hoc committee. But if we push that out, it can create, it is possible, it can create other problems, costs, timeframe delays and
Okay,
things
I
like that.
understand that. There's no way you can get the volume up because the volume is connected to the owl.
Yeah, no, sorry, that's actually the problem. The owl is not functioning right now.
And
So.
the owl involves volume.
Yeah, so I have been trying to place my microphone against the laptop. Again, this is with the best equipment we have in this room here. Putting the microphone against the laptop. If folks in here speak loud, and Maren, if you and your team can speak loudly, it may be possible for folks to hear you better. We apparently are having a problem with the owl, so I'm going to put the microphone against my laptop computer. If you could all speak very loudly, that would be helpful.
I'll do my best.
Okay, so go right ahead if you'd like. Do you want me to give a word of introduction or are you ready to?
Sure, you could introduce.
Okay, so just a couple of things. Market Landing Park, some of you are familiar with the design process already. And just by a show of hands, maybe who's familiar generally with the, okay. So this project's been underway for a while. I'm not going to go through this diagram in great detail, but we've used this several times during presentations. We've gone all the way from an inventory of the site. Now the city council has appropriated funds for Sasaki to do the full design ready for bid. Our plan at this point is to do bidding over the winter, just to give you a sense of time frame. Bidding over the fall and winter season to have construction start in the spring. This is all very much dependent on the funds that the city council has recently decided to appropriate for the project, including CPA funds. We also have some funds from the trust fund commissioners, and we're awaiting a grant from the state, although we think we're hopeful we'll be successful in that one. We've had some good exchanges with the grant administrator. We do think we'll get those funds, and that would allow us to start construction in the spring. However, because the funds are limited, we're looking to phase that, and that's an important part of what we're doing here is to create the park features first. That's our priority. So we've gone from the concept and schematic design process, working with the city council and the ad hoc committee that was designated specifically for this when the redevelopment authority was dissolved. The part of that process and part of that formal agreement going forward with the city council was in order to establish this ad hoc committee. And so the ad hoc committee has been reviewing and approving the overall scheme of development here for this park expansion. Things like the number of parking spaces left over, how much park space, where it goes, working with Sasaki. And so Sasaki's been preparing those plans. And what you're seeing here tonight is based on all of that work. So you can see that we're basically at this, we've just received 75% plans a few weeks back from Sasaki. We've been reviewing those internally. And so you're going to see some of those plans tonight. We'll be able to zoom and pan a little bit on that. But we're here to give you an overview of the park itself so that prior to permitting, starting up formally in August, and certainly prior to our having 100% plans ready for bid, we want to make sure that everything addresses the planning board's concerns too, because in this case, you're reviewing both the site layout and the new building, although it's a relatively small structure. The downtown overlay district requires the planning board to review new architecture in the downtown as well. So that being the case, you have both the site plan approval for the project and the DOD special permit for the restroom visitor facility. And we need to incorporate any adjustments that might be necessary here in the plans that are submitted to the board and approved also, obviously at the end, and obviously into our bid documents. We're hopeful that we've done enough work thus far that there won't be drastic changes or concerns from this end, only because we've received a fair amount of direction from the city council thus far. That being the case, this is where we are in our process. This is the proposed plan. I think you're probably generally familiar with this. Is not inconsistent with what you've seen. If you've been here for a while, you've seen other plans for the central waterfront. It's relatively consistent in terms of having park space expand out from the central embayment. So we've got the wings of the park, what we're referring to as the east and west wings. And then we have the remaining parking areas. You can see on the west side, a much smaller lot, sort of half size of what's there today. And the east side, again, shrinking further. You may know if you've been out there that we've in 2019 or so, we created some temporary lawn spaces to make those spaces useful to folks in the interim time frame. That unfortunately the pandemic came around and it made that negated a bit of that, but that space is going to be used actually for the my understanding is the city council tonight was looking at the shanties again for temporary use in that lawn space going for the part of the season. So using those spaces temporarily, and so where the West Embayment Plaza label is there and the Ferry Wharf Plaza, we've got some temporary lawn space there. And so we're basically expanding those wings further, taking the parking away from those areas. So to review the scope of the project with you tonight and just to see any concerns you have, behind the berm, so we have the boardwalk there, right? And we're expanding behind the berm, adding some fill to raise these lawn spaces so that folks will have a similar vantage point to what they have when they're on top of the berm. We've also incorporated this Indigenous Peoples Place in this little lawn space here. It's close to the sculpture park. One of the directions that we got from the city council because of the budget and what's available for funding, or it's made available for funding right now for this project. We have been asked to try to raise funds for some of the site elements. So for instance, the site sculptures, or the Indigenous Peoples Place sculpture, for instance, those may be donations or funding at least donated for that. What we're trying to do here is the primary park component. So most important to us in this 100% set of plans and the first phase of construction in the spring, although we're looking for approval of the whole project, the first phase would be the walkways, the shared use path, the grading and so forth. We might, depending on the funding sources that come in, add into our bid or into a later work next year even the sculptural elements and things like that. The benches even, we're looking for donations on that. Possibly the tree grove here that you see near the harbor master entry. So we're maintaining that access. But it's possible that some of these elements will be partly fundraised in addition to the base work that we're paying for in the bid. That being the case, you can see here, we're creating a new Central Wharf Way that goes out to Merrimack Street. This is where that pop-up park of the seashells that the NRA put together some years ago has been. That area would be replaced not in the initial phase next year. We do have to remove for this project and the new pedestrian way that's being created. We do have to remove the restroom trailer and the shed that's there, the visitor booth. The expectation is to have potentially interim facilities, not necessarily relocating the trailer that's there to the seashell area. So this area may stay sort of a passive park space with some sort of elements of the seashell space, maybe refined a little bit, working on that area. But in essence, this visitor building would not be completed next year necessarily. We would be doing the walkway that extends out to Merrimack Street here. We would be doing the shared use path or bikeway connection east and west across the site through the central embayment. The names are renamed. The ways are renamed, by the way. So upper and lower railroad. For those of you who are familiar with the ways, that's why this one is being labeled Central Wharf Way. And we had discussions and agreement with the Waterfront Trust and the settlers about that aspect of the project. We also are very importantly here trying to finish one of the legal obligations for the Central Waterfront, which is the completion of Ferry Wharf Way as a pedestrian access out to the water's edge. So that would be another pedestrian way built next to the east lot, which is again shrunk in size primarily by the reduction here you see by the water. That whole area would be turned into park space, and parking would be pushed back here. We may have an interim condition in which there's a few more spaces squeezed in only because we may not be doing the parking areas next year. Right now, there's not funding to do all the paving and curbing and so forth in there. So we will do as best we can with the budget to landscape and screen along the edges there. And we're refining those transitional areas right now. But in essence, we're looking to complete the pedestrian ways and those primary public park spaces, and then look to future phases and funding to finish the remainder of it, but to do as best we can with the budget that's made available to us. There are a couple of design principles, and I don't know, Maren, if you wanted to speak to these at all, but this is coming from Sasaki, some of the important things that Sasaki is trying to incorporate, right?
Sure, I can take it from here. Thank you for that introduction. Can everyone hear me okay?
As loud as you can.
Okay. So these are principles we developed during the concept and schematic phase coming out of community engagement and our work with the city. So we want to develop a program that creates an active and inclusive year-round destination for the park, keep the character of Newburyport and the waterfront, promote connectivity between the water and downtown, and from an environmental perspective, build a landscape that's resilient and sustainable. And so we just have a few eye-level views. Go ahead.
Oh, no, Maren, I was going to offer, if it's okay with you, not to step on your toes, it might be helpful only because they might be having an easier time hearing me.
Sure.
It's all right. I might review these if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, just because it might be easier. These are some vantage points, excellent vantage points that Sasaki has made for the project. Obviously, these things get refined as we go along, but this is meant to show as you're looking from the central embayment area, you're looking east through that, you'll see that lawn space here behind the berm that's being created. The pedestrian walkway is being cut through the granite there. There will be an opening where there currently isn't one. We'll have to remove electrical transformer and some other equipment back here to do that. And then there'll be some steps leading up to some raised swing elements. And we have some more graphics for that, but this will be, I think, a very nice seating area for folks. We're also looking for some fundraising for those elements, those above ground elements as requested by the council. But those will be a series of 12 to 16 of these swings that folks can sit on with sort of an architectural element, kind of like the pergola you saw earlier tonight. This is a view down Ferry Wharf Way through the middle of that. So you see the structure on both sides. And again, the structure might be a slight variation on this, but this is to give you an idea of what that experience would be like. Behind that, by the way, you can see the shared use path crossing through the raised lawn space, and behind that where the swing sets are. This is actually looking from where the sculpture park is today, or on the west parking lot, closer to where the waterfront trust lot is. So looking towards the embayment, you can see there's a little bit of a widened into area right here. There's some bike racks, and there's a sculpture that will be, our plan is to have a shipbuilding sculpture of some sort here, although we haven't worked out the details of that. And based on funding, that may be an element that's fundraised outside the city as opposed to paid for by the city. But that will be a shipbuilding sculpture to go with some interpretive panels that we have planned for the project as well, to cover things like urban renewal, the history of Market Lane Park, even going back to indigenous times, Native Americans and so forth. This is a viewpoint from the raised lawn space behind the berm. So you're looking at the central embayment is over here on your right, and on your left is just the Merrimack River. And this is an area we've had to do some work recently on. We've spent a fair amount of time early this year with the city council and its ad hoc committee on this. So this is relatively recently, we've been able to refine this. This is the area by Merrimack Street where the new facility will go. The trailer facility is about here, and the shed maybe sort of about there. We're putting a pedestrian walkway in there, so that new structure would not be able to stay there. For those of you who've been following the project, we have had a fair amount of debate over the placement of the building, its design, and its programming. And so just to review a part of that, because it's important background for you to have, knowing where the city council has directed where this plan is now for the most part. The building footprint was originally shown here, roughly here by Sasaki. The city council, I think in response to comments from the Waterfront Trust and some of the settlers and cows, had requested that we move this structure further to the west. And so it was in this sort of lawn space here, closer to Somerby's Way. We were trying to be responsive to the council's request to essentially preserve as much of the view shed, so to speak, to the water's edge. The assumption there was that a more narrow building would be preferable for that purpose. So Sasaki has obviously modified the building to be more narrow and more linear, perpendicular to the river. That dictates some other things too, like the solar panel array alignment on the roof. But in doing so, when we shifted that to try to respond to the council's concerns, it was determined that the building, corner of the building anyway, would end up being in the flood zone, and taking into account future sea level rise, we did not want to be placing the building in a location like that. And so we had some concern raised about that placement, but also the costs associated with that placement, because there's fill that has to be added. So in doing that and having that conversation, we ultimately got feedback from the council relatively recently to move the building back to this side over here. And so the building has basically shifted back, but the council did provide feedback to us after a fair amount of discussion and debate and the programming of the restrooms. There was some discussion earlier this year about whether or not to have a gender neutral restroom setup. That was ultimately rejected. The state was applied to for a variance under the plumbing code. That was not approved. Again, just as background for you. And so the reason why that's important is because when we came back to the city council, instead of having your standard sort of restroom setup where you have a male and female set of rooms and a common vestibule, the council has said to us, rather than reverting back to that as the norm, rather than having one gender neutral large restroom setup and going back to the norm of just male and female restrooms, collective, to actually have individual stalls for every restroom. So that's the reason why, as you look at this plan here, we can show you the interior, but that's why this building is very linear, and that's why this building has a bunch of doors on the outside facing outside, is because on each of the sides. It's not necessarily the thing that we would normally think to do here, but that was the request there, was to have these stalls be individuals. And I think that was partly to deal with the influx of folks that might need to use the restrooms, and alternating between male and female, and the lines that can sometimes pile up, having as much flexibility as possible, while also having the individual have comfort level with whoever might be in their own restroom. So that being the case, I know people could take their kids in there and so forth. So that being the case, we were asked to have individual stalls, which is this long portion of the building back here. The front portion is actually the visitor booth space that would be staffed at least seasonally. And then you see some outdoor seating areas. More recently, we've been having discussions and working out the access, so accessible ramps leading up to the site, a staircase here, and working with the ADA coordinator and others, working to determine what the best alignment is for some of these things. But it's important for you, I think, just to understand where we've come to in terms of the building, where it is right now in the design. The council also had suggested that we use a wood siding for the building in addition to that. So that's another reason why you see here, for instance, the wood collaborative panel siding rather than a brick exterior. Mara, did you and your team want to offer anything else, or Dan here before I move to the next slide?
No, I think you covered it. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So this, you have here sections, and we saw the lines for those sections here on the plan. But these sections here are showing, you can see on the top one, section A is really the Merrimack Street view. So you're going to see the short face of the building if you're standing directly across the street where the so-called Unicorn Street is, or the Green Street parking lot. You'd see the space of the building with the glass. That's the visitor booth space. We're working this, the plans are being developed further. So our schematic plan here, we've been updating our renderings to match the site plan. So as far as the plaza placement, the building placement, this is showing the elevation of the building on one of the sides here. You can see the doors facing out. There's wood panel siding matching the rest of the building. This is recessed a bit, so there's a bit of an overhang there in the roof. For those who are just outside the door. And there's an overhang on the building just out front that's provide a little bit of shade during the summer months. And then behind this sort of raised parapet is the solar panels. And there's one of the difficult things about a project like this is there are a number of different competing interests and requests. And one of the requests here amongst all the others we've been giving guidance on and sometimes going back and forth over, like the building footprint, is that there's a city ordinance that requires us to try to do net zero energy for buildings. So one of the difficult things here as we shift the building location is just making sure we have enough solar panels and the best alignment we can on this building to try to make it net zero. So up there behind the parapet wall are some solar panels to get as much sunlight as possible to offset. And we do believe that this relatively small facility will be able to be net zero. Whereas, for instance, the Cutter Fire Station project that Jordy's working on, we don't expect to be able to fully cover the building with that, although we do think we can cover a fair amount of ground with solar there. Whereas this one, because it's relatively small and relatively light load, should be able to be done. These renderings, again, have not been updated to show the shifting or alternating between the plaza space and the building. But what you can see here is the visitor building, the glass vestibule space for the visitor booth up front, and then the restroom doors behind. We're doing the best we can to screen it with landscaping. We have the seating space. This is the new pedestrian walkway in front of that. This is approximately the location of the existing crosswalk. So you see this sort of period lighting. This is Merrimack Street. The Browns Wharf area is just off to the left or to the rear there. This view is, again, if you imagine the building shifting down a little bit and the plaza shifting, again, we haven't had a chance to update the rendering since the new guidance and development of the plans. But this shows the building exterior. You can see the lobby space there for the visitor booth, and the doors there screened in part by some vegetation. That's Somerby's Way, the pedestrian way. There's a landscape buffer and some pedestrian access that will be provided. And again, Merrimack Street is on the right side there with some landscaping in front of the building as well. And on this plan, this is really the same sketch layout you had seen previously, but we're just to show you a bit of why we were moving the building away from that corner there, the FEMA zone. Something we're doing here for resiliency is we've had some discussions with key reps from the resiliency committee, including Jane Healy, the chair, Julie Govertson, obviously myself, and John Eric White, the city engineer, and a few others. And have come to agree that it makes sense to start with a sort of a 15.33 foot elevation for this building to keep it above a projected sea level rise. And we know we have some of the consultant team here may want to speak to this further, or if you have questions about this, can speak to this further. But to bring this building up as far as we think we reasonably can do without creating a great deal of grading issues right by Merrimack Street and a bunch of switchback ramps. So it was agreement that was a reasonable height to bring it to. And then we're glad that the building is shifting back this direction. It makes it easier to accomplish that height without a significant amount of fill or grading. But moving it here up by the street, you then see that what we have underneath this building, although it's not shown on this plan, what we've worked out is that this building will be designed such that in the future we can throw some I-beams underneath it and raise it even further if it's determined that the building needs to be raised in the future, and we're still deciding we're going to salvage or use that building at that point. We'll be able to raise it further in the future if we need to. for that purpose. So we had some discussions not too long ago with the city engineer walking through some of the details on that. So there's generally speaking, at least for those key stakeholders that have been involved, there's agreement that we're doing what we can here with respect to the structure and bringing that as close as we can to Merrimack Street, as high as we can, without creating an awkward sort of situation for the coming decades with respect to ADA ramps or excessive amounts of construction of concrete walls and railings and so forth. But the ramps that you see here would be provided for accessibility purposes. And again, Maren and the rest of your team, I just wanted to offer, if there's anything you wanted to offer here that I missed?
Very thorough, Andy.
So with that, we wanted to open it up for any questions you might have for us. Obviously, our goal is to come back to you with plans that address any of the concerns that you have. And we do have an aerial photograph, of course, to compare against the existing conditions. For instance, the interim lawn spaces are there. So should you have any questions in context? With that, I guess I turn it over to the chair.
Grab a microphone. Whoever wants to speak first.
So I guess I have two concerns, or two sets of concerns. The one concern that I have that I've expressed before has to do with the alignment of the shared use path. And particularly, it seems to me that you're eliminating any possibility of a shared use path across the site, because as I understand it, what we've been told in the past, the shared use path is going to end at the embayment. There's not going to be a shared use path going across the embayment. So I'm really concerned about that, because that was something that years ago we were told was going to happen. We were going to continue the shared use path through the downtown. So I'm very concerned about that. That may be a showstopper for me altogether. The other part of that is running the shared use path into the sidewalk between the parking for Tuscan C, whatever it is, and the restaurant itself. That seems like a really stupid thing to do, because that's a really narrow sidewalk, it's crowded, and it just doesn't make sense to me to do it. It seems like this plan presumes that Tuscan's going to go away and something else is going to be redeveloped somehow. We just don't know that's going to happen. So those are my two concerns about the shared use path. My other concern is about the visitor center and restaurants. So I don't think the design at all fits into the downtown overlay district. I think we have real problems approving that special permit. I think the idea of bathroom stalls opening into an outdoor seating area is very unpleasant. I don't think I would ever want to sit in that plaza the way the building is designed right now. I really think that, I understand what your constraints are. I don't get why there's a concern about the orientation of that building preserving a viewpoint, because the viewpoint is only a view from the parking lot across the street. So I understand this is an issue that has been raised at the city council. I don't get it. I don't agree with it, and I just think that visitor center restaurant facility is going to have to change. So I guess what I would suggest is that we pull out of this approval process and come back to that later. I don't want it to hold up everything, but I'm afraid that it would be it's just too awkward, and it doesn't rise to the quality that we should have in the downtown. I'm not even sure it's an improvement of the trail to tell you the truth. So I guess that's a pretty strong statement, but I'm sticking with it.
Did you want me to respond to any of those as we go along, or how do you want to handle that?
We'll make notes and do it all at once.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna, Richard, I'll get to you in a moment. We're gonna finish with in the room first. Hang on. Alden?
Yeah, I want to second Rick's concern about the shared use path. I first looked at this and said, okay, we're going to share the boardwalk area in front of the embayment. There's going to be a painted line, and pedestrians are going to stay off of the shared use path side and so forth, so that I can ride my bike right through there. But it sounds like from what Rick said, that's not the plan. So that is a concern for me. So I just want to second that. I had a couple questions just looking at the proposed plan, and just to clarify, the east and west wings of the embayment. You talk about having fill, it's raising the level there to the height of the berm. Is that consistent all the way across? Is that the plan?
There's a little bit of variation there. For instance, the indigenous people's place, they're always going to have a carve out there, right? So, and there's some topography obviously sloping down to the shared use path. So,
Yeah, I just was curious. It's hard to tell from the plan there. The second thing in the proposed plan, there is a walkway halfway between the stage and the firehouse in the current world, and then on the proposed plan, that's not there anymore. Is that going to be removed? Is that?
yes, apologies. That's actually on a previous, I don't know why it's missing here. On the previous rendering, we had that. It got removed for some reason. It got added back in. We were not proposing to remove that walkway. The Waterfront Trust is expecting that to stay, and that would remain in place. It apparently is just not rendered here. Apologies for that.
Just wondered. Thank you. And then I do have some concerns similar to Rick with the restroom stalls opening out onto the seating. That does seem very awkward to me. I don't know if there's any options for having a central hallway such that they open up inside instead of on the outside. And that may be more plumbing, but it would seem a more pleasant environment for the seating areas. Thanks.
I absolutely agree with what you said. I didn't have a solution, but I agree with Fred. I don't like it opening up, but I am a big fan of these separate bathrooms. So that's really important today. I do have a question about the rendition of the visitor center. Is that exterior rendition accurate to what you're proposing?
I'm sorry, that last.
It's a very modern look. Is that accurate to what you're proposing, the exterior of the visitor center?
When you say you were, well, Sasaki has provided a design. The city council had asked for a wood exterior as opposed to a brick siding, sided exterior. You know, the council, I don't know that they really provide a lot of specificity per se, but they were looking for something a little bit more akin to the harbor master facility rather than something like, you know, a brick building.
Modern look at this presentation.
Yeah, and I would defer. I don't know if Dan Dwyer wanted to add anything from the Sasaki end, but that's what they were thinking, you know, when they came back with a rendering for us.
It's tough. I admit it's tough to hear the questions, but it's I think the question.
There's a question about the panel siding versus say clapboard siding, like the harbor master facility.
Yeah, it is meant to be clapboard siding. It's wood clapboard siding, horizontal boards, cedar, and right now we're thinking that it would be left natural, so they would gray out like a build. I think the harbor master is also unfinished. The harbor master, I believe, is cedar shingle. We were looking at clapboard or clapboard board siding. You know, and one, you know, some of the some of the influences in making this small building that would not detract from the historic character of Newburyport and Market Square. We weren't trying to mimic, say, buildings nearby, but we were, you know, sort of keen to be influenced by sort of the unpretentious nature of the federal style, which is very common all over Newburyport. And so, you know, this building with the rhythms, we understand the challenge of the doors on the outside, and maybe then we can look at adding a colonnade or some sort of screen wall or even vegetation to maybe limit the view to those doors. But, you know, sort of the rhythm of those openings is again sort of akin to federal style buildings, and the de-emphasis on the roof. You know, we need to do a flat roof to get our solar panels on there to adhere to our net zero initiative. But it does, again, federal style buildings kind of de-emphasize the roof line, and so you don't necessarily notice the pitch on the roof, but there's usually the roof is set back, and so the flat roof may be something that's, say, seen as modern, but it is sort of akin to some federal style buildings. There's also, you know, the orientation of the building being a linear perpendicular to Merrimack Street, again, is in line with how buildings were set. The wharf buildings, the long wharf buildings that were set in that same direction, also helped sort of guide the way we thought about this building. And the extended canopy on that south we saw some original images of Market House that had sort of a stiff canopy instead of a cloth canopy, a stiff canopy along that south face to shade the glass on the south face of the building. We also tried to put a lot of glass on that around the three sides of the visitor center, so as to be very transparent and more storefront-like. And then the doors to the bathrooms are recessed back a few feet, about 3 feet from the face of the sidewall of the visitor center. So it's again trying to sort of de-emphasize the bathrooms, and emphasize the visitor center on the south facing Merrimack Street.
Thanks, Dan.
Richard?
So I just wanted to chime in specifically about the visitor center and the architecture and its look, and throw a contrast to my fellow commissioner or planning board member concern. It's in schematic design. I personally think it's appropriate that it not try to mimic brick or be kitsch, if you will, to specific of our historic 19th century architecture, and welcome the contrast. It also helps differentiate itself as a new building versus an old building. And so I would just argue to allow the designers to work through the programmatic issues and the concerns raised about the exterior doors to the bathroom stalls, but to not abandon the look of the facility having remnants or a nod, if you will, to historic federal architecture, but not to try to mimic it and water it down. I think it's a refreshing change to actually introduce something different. And by way of contrast, it differentiates itself from retail and housing and supports the fact that this is a unique public programmed building.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak?
Bob has his hand up, Bonnie.
That's about to start speaking here, and then we'll go to Bob.
I just wanted to echo the concerns about the shared use path. And then with respect to bathrooms, I understand why they are the way that they're proposed. And I do think the single stalls are a good idea. I would echo, I think somebody just mentioned some screening. I wonder if there is something that could be done to sort of just separate the bathroom area from the seating area. Screening with some sort of a mural or a sculpture, something to that effect to separate those two areas.
Okay, Bob, you're on.
Thanks. Bob, go right ahead if you'd like.
Okay, sorry, little trouble hearing. I would echo Richard's comments about the visitor center. I think where I am right now, where there with the current design is I don't think you're there yet. What I heard from Mr. Dwyer is all of the right intentions, referencing materials of the waterfront, referencing a little bit of the character of Newburyport. I wouldn't get too hung up on the Federalist references for a building of this scale. I kind of think the Harbor Masters structure, which uses traditional materials in a more contemporary way, is something you could look at as well. I also think the glass and the mullions and all of that are not feeling quite right just yet in terms of the storefront system, and I would echo all the comments about screening the entrances to the toilets themselves. Andy, if you could put the site plan back up again. I had a couple of questions about the site plan, mostly having to do with the parking. And you know, it appears the existing lot, which is to the right-hand side of the plan, very logical layout. I guess I would like to understand how that is screened from the landscape area. But the layout is very logical with that lot. Comparing that to the lot down by the Black Cow, it's a little bit difficult in this drawing to understand exactly how circulation works, but it seems like the circulation in and through the west lot is a little bit difficult, particularly the water side of that lot, if that's actually an exit. So that, I mean, parking lots to me need to be very simple in their geometries, and the more complex they become, the more there's potential for issues with people parking. And this one seems a little bit difficult, particularly on the water side of the lot. And I don't understand, are we saying now that if I were to drive through to the Tuscan Sea Grill, am I just going straight through now and not kind of bearing to the right as you drive through? It's not clear how circulation works if you were to drive all the way to the waterfront directly and then take a left-hand turn in front of the Tuscan Sea Grill. So maybe you could clarify that a little bit as well.
Yeah, Bob, if I could, just to clarify that for you and the other members, part of it might be, unfortunately, we're not showing in a line type the existing waterfront trust or Riverside Park parking lot layout, but that we could perhaps add that to renderings for our formal presentation, you know, when we get there. But that layout is not changing really. So in effect, if you're traveling through there, and I'm trying to use these tools here, but
so you do go to the right. Okay.
you'd be coming, you know, down here as you normally do. The west, so the waterfront trust lot is really not changing for the most part, right? So in reality, it's really just the bottom that's changing. The reality is that the waterfront trust, other than that, you know, we remember that walkway that was put in front of the new Black Cow. You know, since then, nothing new is really being added there. The driveway that goes in here is essentially the same in terms of being able to get in there, but this would be a one-way out down here, entering back into the usual cycle where the waterfront trust lot cycles around like this. So in this case, you'd be coming out here and flowing with that traffic. The waterfront trust had wanted nose-in spaces down here, and so that's why those are shown here. So I don't know if that helps at all with to that particular.
It does. There just seems like there's a lot going on right in that area that you were just pointing to, but I understand a little bit of the background on that now. Just one last question relative to year-round use of the waterfront. I know there were some comments early on when this was, you know, you were soliciting public comments about the working waterfront, and you know what happens to docks and dock storage and all of that in the wintertime. Can you just address that also? Is that
That's a great question. We didn't go into you know, a great detail here on this particular area, although we do have some slides to this we can show for your coming presentation. But the docks are generally stored here right now, and the harbor master basically uses a crane to, I think you already know this, but maybe others don't. It reaches over with a crane here to grab them, and when the gangway is put in there. We work with the harbor master, and this plan will basically have a shifting of the point that he's putting everything in down here. So he'll be storing the docks here. We've sized the area to make sure that he can do that. The crane would essentially reach from here, and he would have a new gangway. We're gonna basically weld a new you know, platform for him to just extend his gangways off of there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And just could you address the landscape screening at the east lot? How is that screened from the park itself?
Yeah, so I'm going to zoom into that area a little bit, and then I'm going to switch to and if Maren and her team might want to speak to it all, that's fine. The landscape plan or the black and white line drawings that show this area One of the things we haven't quite figured out yet, and I don't know where Sasaki is with this, we can discuss more, but they're looking at this transitional area right here because what was recommended by the Community Preservation Committee earlier this year and what was appropriated by the City Council was not enough to do the parking areas as well, or all the landscaping necessarily that goes with that. We're doing the best we can to work within budget and to still start construction next year for the park areas, but that would mean some transitional areas here. We may have grading that's coming down with perhaps less landscaping, maybe there. So I'm going to switch to the black and white line drawing there, but you can kind of get a sense of the screening we're trying to place around that parking area. And while I pull it up, does Maren, I don't know if you or any of your team want to speak to that any further.
Sure. So in that area, we have proposed a buffer planting. So there'll be a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees and sort of multi-layered plantings, so that when you're on the shared use path, you get the sense that you're in a park and not the sense that you're.
Sorry, Maren, could you just say that again?
Sure. So we're proposing a buffer planting here. So it's a mix of deciduous and evergreen and multi-layered, so that when you're on the shared use path, you get the sense that you're within the park and not next to the parking lot.
So the intention is to screen the parking lot from the other activities.
Correct.
That's really what I was asking. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Could I just respond to one comment that Rick had made earlier? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. It's just there's a lot to.
I'm curious to know what the resiliency considerations are closer to the water. I noticed that there were steps up from the boardwalk, and just add this to the list of things that are going to be responded to. But just to speak to how the design will respond over time to the storm surge and sea level rise. Is the whole thing sacrificial at some point? I know it was talked about the visitor center being somewhat raised, but I'd like to know what the elevations are that are considerations for all the rest of the park.
Yep.
And any considerations for, you mentioned the Indigenous Peoples Plaza might be, I don't know, you call that lowered. Is there some more, so it might be able to contain some of the water? So
Yeah.
that whole business from, say, the shared use path to the water, I'm wanting to hear about.
Sure. Yeah. And
Just leave it at that. You can respond to all the other questions as well.
Okay, sorry. So we have Stephanie Quill here from BHB, who's been part of the team here, looking at the resiliency side and working with the Conservation Commission application because the commission has to approve this project as well. So we've had a fair amount of discussion about resiliency, and Stephanie may want to weigh in on this. We're doing what we can to raise park areas, and there are some diagrams we can provide in the full presentation to the board. We didn't include everything here, not wanting to overwhelm you on the informal night, but there's been an attempt here to raise some park areas as best we can without having an excessive amount of fill brought in, because future sea level rise does go out to, I think, as Rick knows, up to Market Square, and the Bullnose. So it's not, we could have some debate as to how far out we're planning for and how much work we do now versus the incoming or future decades. The bulkhead wall project is being raised. That new project that we're hopeful to get under construction this winter season is actually going to be raised in height along the boardwalk area, and then we're raising some grades here. The building will be pushed as close as we can really to Merrimack Street. Stephanie, do you want to speak to that further?
Yeah, sure. So we used the kind of brand new modeling, the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model, and we looked at 50 inches of sea level rise by 2070. We looked at how the storm surge would come onto the site, and then we made some decisions about grading to try to reduce the frequency of flooding on the site. But there are constraints. Again, that this particular project, as Andy mentioned, it doesn't directly address the bulkhead. We also have the waterfront trust property right through the center of the site, making that an area that needs to stay at its existing grade. So we were able to select a grading plan that provides some elevation, elevates the low points, ties back into the existing conditions around the property edges, and still provides a good amount of protection for both tidal flooding and some of the storm surge that we expect to see. We've also specified a planting schedule that uses coastal plants that are resilient to coastal conditions so that they can survive some occasional inundation in the future.
As far as the shared use path alignment, Rick probably knows this as well, but there was a fair amount of discussion. I was here for the, as part of the Bob, Andy and Bob Sidford, Andy Sidford and Bob Hewlig alignment plan or schematic plan and the alignment of that path going close to the firehouse. I actually at the time was partial to that alignment as well. I sort of come to accept this as sort of what's expected here, given all the discussions that I've been privy to thus far in this project and the design of it. I appreciate the concerns. You're correct that the expectation here is that the riders, anybody who's riding a bike would get off and walk through that embayment area as opposed to riding through. But we also know that informally, when we were out there doing this sort of charrette thing at tables out there, we had people who were biking through, through that section. It does happen. So the expectation generally is that when there's enough people there, people are going to be slowing down just because it won't be possible to ride through there. But beyond that, I appreciate the concern about that. I don't know how much the city council or its ad hoc committee would be willing to revisit that issue. But we did spend a fair amount of time on that, and it did actually go to this direction versus the original alignment that the NRA was considering, which was to have it curve back towards the firehouse and around the central lawn space. There was a fair amount of debate about going through the top, the bottom, or even in that middle path that Alden had mentioned earlier, and those were rejected in favor of this one.
So it's not just a question for me.
Can I ask one additional quick question?
No, wait, let's, you following up on this?
I'm following up with this.
Yeah, so Rick's going to follow up on just one thing.
I just feel like
Yeah.
when we're walking your bikes across the day, and there's crowds of people there, it's hazardous. I think I'm going to run my bike into a little kid, if I'm walking my bike. So I think that's actually the densest part of the entire park, and we're putting everybody there. I just think it's a traffic nightmare.
Want to take the Bob? You want to come back in again?
Yeah, I just had one
You,
quick,
Andy?
totally unrelated question. From time to time when we have looked at this plan, we've talked about program elements like food trucks and things that create a little bit more energy in the park in terms of the users. And I wondered if there is any discussion about that and where they might be accommodated, if there is discussion about that. So just curious whether that's been talked about at all.
Yeah, Bob, definitely. That's a good point. There has been discussion about that, and we didn't, unfortunately, I didn't speak to this earlier, but I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit in this area here, and it's not really shown in lined up in this drawing, but actually it might be shown better on the black and white. So let me just shift to that. Yeah, so it might be a little hard to see here in the black and white that I'm showing you, but this is that area there. So next to the east lot. What we have done is essentially to try to provide some spots here, both for pickup and drop off for some of those events for some vehicles to park in this area here next to it's sort of a landscape strip and then the walkway at the edge of the parking lot, as well as a temporary lawn space. This is sort of a grass paved type element here placed underneath the grass to help support vehicles if they're placed there during the season.
Okay.
To have some space for that. So that's kind of the general assumption is that would accommodate those types of things generally.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
getting back to the distinction between the site plan approval and the special permit. I think Richard was kind of suggesting that this was a design process, but when we approve the special permit, it's going to be a design. It's not going to be a design. It's not going to be a schematic at that point. So, do you think that it makes sense to separate out the site plan from the special permit and to give more time to think about and consider the special permit process, or do these things all have to happen together? That's the question, because we can't approve a schematic.
Yeah, understood.
It's going to be final design.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, and I appreciate the dilemma. I look at it from both sides, really, in my capacity. I can see it from both sides. There are some site integration aspects that have to be worked out now. So, for instance, because of the proximity of Central Wharf Way. So if there was a general understanding or agreement relative to the building footprint, and that was not necessarily changing, then it might be more easy to break out the building piece per se. But we're trying to make sure that the walkway connections and so forth are worked out at least sufficiently for the Central Wharf Way area. I don't know, I'm going to ask if the Sasaki team wants to weigh in here or add anything to that, but we have to have at least some level of detail in that area so that if we were to parse off, say, the building or even the plaza area in the building and sort of try to treat that as a separate review or a later review. One, we're under contract with Sasaki to finish the design this year and to have it ready for bid, even though we're not anticipating construction of that piece of it, but because it has to be coherently designed, done at once. But I don't know if the team wants to add anything to that. I just want to make sure we do enough on the site in that area. If we were to try to parse that off, that we do not, neglect the integration that would have to be done later or have to redo something. So. Maren, do you or your team want to offer anything on that?
I'll just point out that both the landscape and the architecture have submitted 75% construction documents, and that's the design that we're reviewing now.
Right. So in the coming weeks or months, we're basically going from that 75%. We think of it as like a Mass DOT set of plans, going from the 75% to 100% that would be bid ready, plans and specs. So the black and white line drawings that you saw is just an excerpt of a stack of, drawing sheets with, the materials, the plantings and so forth. Each of those drawing sheets is showing a different thing. And there are tiled sheets for each because it's such a large site. But we have to refine those details enough that the package is ready in the coming months. Each thing that we need to tweak here, and this is the difficult part with a project like this where there's a million different inputs, is each time there's a revision done to something that may not have been anticipated in the scope of work originally, because of budgetary constraints and what was expected coming from the council, we might have to spend more time on the design, and spend more money on that, and then push out certain features of it. So we would have to work those things in there. But the current timeline is to try to go from 75%, what we got a couple of weeks ago, to 100% plans in the coming weeks or months. So that it is actually ready for bid, at least the park, elements of it. And we don't want to leave, edges of it in a situation where we're trying to do something and then finding out we need to shift those things later on because of things that were excluded from the plan review now.
So you basically want to keep the whole thing together.
It's definitely preferable to have at least as far as the site layout. And if there's some discussion about pushing the building design, maybe that'd be easier than the building footprint, I guess, in general is what I would say. Beyond that, I don't know if the Sasaki team want to offer anything else about trying to parse off the building or the plaza area separately in some way. Maren, did anyone in your team, or would I cover that already?
No, I think we've been through, in the last couple of months, we had attempted to design the architecture sort of separately from the landscape earlier this year and saw those challenges. And so I think we really see the benefit of it working together, given the, it's like 3 or 4 feet of grade change and meeting existing conditions. It may look simple on a plan, but the team has spent quite a bit of time trying to make sure that all of the considerations we've heard from the architecture and landscape, balancing cost and resiliency measures and accessibility have all worked together. So as Indy said, some of the details of the building could certainly be tweaked without having an impact on the landscape, but I certainly advocate for trying to move these along together.
So what is So as I understand it, you're going to be coming with a complete set of plans, including a final design of the building for the August 17th meeting?
Correct. And currently, what you're seeing here, as far other than the renderings that show the building in the opposite location, which shows the plaza, this is the design of the building that we currently have coming out of where we have.
But could there actually be a design? Because this is like sketches and renderings now. There isn't actually the
Oh, you mean black and white elevations?
elevations and like the materials. So you'll have all that by the 17th?
Yeah, we have an architectural set and it will be uploaded as well to go along with the site plan. And I defer, Dan, we may have some supplementary information or revisions to that to show, but basically you're looking at all intents and purposes, those are just detailed plans showing the design that you just saw.
And so what is your timeline for getting a vote from the and those pieces?
Maren, do you want to speak to that in terms of the schedule a little bit? I mean, backing out, of course, from when we're sort of expecting, we need to go to bid basically this winter. Is from a project management perspective, we need to be able to go out to bid. But Sasaki's under a contract to try to get that package ready in enough time for us to take that and add it to our front end and do the whole procurement process, which also takes time.
Yeah, so we're currently going through all of the permitting hearings that are needed and the applications between this month and the end of August. And our goal is to sort of hear all of the feedback. And we've just received feedback also from the ad hoc committee on design approvals, cost estimate, sort of take all of that and then make sure that it's embedded into the 100% set. So between September and October, we'd be working on bringing the drawing set from 75% to 100%. And then, as Andy mentioned, going out to bid shortly after that.
Let me just qualify this. Coming into the meeting tonight, and we said that the August 17th meeting was simply a application completeness vote. Does that mean, from what I'm hearing is the team thinks that they're going to be having a public hearing that night?
Yeah, no, sorry, just to clarify, when the August 3rd meeting was canceled, the expectation was originally that a completeness vote would be taken on that date. So that may, depending on if you're having a concern about that, perhaps we might be pushing this hearing out, but and that's obviously difficult for us as, from a project management perspective, but we were originally anticipating the board looking at the completeness end on August 3rd, but that meeting was canceled.
So I don't know if we've ever done this before. Maybe you remember, we do a completeness.
We have done them on the same night.
And open the public hearing after that?
We have, yeah.
Okay, so if all goes well and they bring all the materials that are listed for, both a special permit, a site plan review, and all of that is lined up and ready to go, and we agree that it's a complete application, then we could open the public hearing that night. So you could conceivably post that as a public hearing as well as a completeness vote.
Correct. Correct.
And if we find that it's not complete, we cannot open the public hearing.
Correct. Correct. We would not have been expecting to close in one night anyway. So just to be clear.
Well, I think the development team needs to understand that this could take well into 2 or 3 meetings. So I don't see it, and we also have another complication, which I was going to discuss with you offline, but I don't know if there's an easy answer to it. If the planning board comes up with significantly different perspectives, opinions, whatever you want to call it, on the site plan and or the special permit to what has been discussed with other stakeholders, in particular the city council, is this going to cause heartburn for the team? Because we are used to just going through the process, and even that can take 2 or 3 nights. So I just want to raise these concerns now. They are not insurmountable, but I'd like the development team to understand that we are in a much more complex situation here than normal. If you were just coming to see us for these 2 applications, it could be 2 or 3 meetings with us. But if anything big comes up that we want in order to approve either the site plan or the special permit, and your team or Andy on your behalf has to cycle back with one of the stakeholders, that could really throw off your entire expectation of going out to bid before the end of the year.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. That's a good point. So we had assumed several meetings with the planning board. I think I would be less, and Sasaki may want to weigh in this too, but I would be less concerned about having several meetings with the planning board. Obviously, I think that's pretty typical, for a review of a project like this or a site, this size. What would concern me more, just looking at it from a project manager's perspective, is, like you said, the city council has given a fair amount of, direction relative to the visitor center, for instance, that use, that programming, the design of it. And so recognizing the planning board's authority under the DOD, that does potentially, result in some disagreement with the city council over what that might be. And I think that comes perhaps less so to the design of the building, but more so to the fact that it increases cost, whether that be continued design work or the actual construction work, depending on what the nature of the changes are. There's been a fair amount of concern from them about things like cost, aspects of the design, and we've tried to be responsive to that, as even that target has been moving over time. And Sasaki's had to modify the design or the location of the building, for instance, several times in response to those points of direction. So if we were to do that here or see that here, that could require some further discussions with the mayor and city council in terms of the budget, in terms of more time frame being needed, more time for Sasaki to do work, and hopefully reach some sort of consensus. Again, remember, we have 9 planning board members and opinions that might be there, plus 11 potential city council opinions, never mind sort of the general public or other inputs that we might get.
So, how much of the park is in the downtown overlay?
The downtown overlay district doesn't encompass the park, so
Doesn't?
I don't believe it encompasses the park. If you want to hang on a second, I can pull up the map, but I don't.
So the why is the.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just referring to part of the park space I think is not within the DOD. Yeah.
Are we clear that the visitor center is the only thing that is within the DOD?
I'm pretty sure that that's the case, but let me just double check for you.
And the special permit is for a DOD?
Correct. That's what the zoning administrator had determined was necessary. And oh, no, I'm mistaken. Yeah, sorry. So the whole waterfront is covered by the DOD.
So
Sorry, it was extended over the market landing park.
Do the structures, the pergolas and everything, they need special permits also?
I'm not sure that the zoning administrator did not determine those to be, and I don't, my recollection, again, on quick thought of looking through the DOD provisions, I don't believe that those trigger.
The fountain for the water, for the institution fountain was a DOD. Yeah, maybe I'm lying about that. I thought that was.
I think that the institution fountain came before all that. Yeah, that came almost 8 years ago, or maybe more.
I'm just wondering whether, I just want to make sure we don't miss.
Yeah, I'll double check on that, and I'll also confirm with Jennifer, her that she will agreement on whatever the interpretation is there, but we'll double check just to be sure to your point.
And I guess the point I just want to make is it's a lot easier to get the site plan approval, in terms of votes than it is to get special permit. So that's another reason, if there's any way to segment out some aspect of the building, so we don't have to deal with that in the tight timeline. You're not going to build it anyway. You're not going to go to the first.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I guess again, my major concern is just hoping that. Right.
If we can get to a certain point of the site plan with that, without having to, if we can come to an undesigned building, that's interesting. But that seems like it may be a.
Yes, understood. Understood. Just trying to point you back to the fact that, and I agree with, I think, and I understand exactly what you're saying. What the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is that the building footprint can be modified depending on what you're asking for here and whether or not the council is willing to change that, essentially, because they've given some direction here. Whether or not that changes could impact, say, the alignment of an accessible space, walkway widths and so forth. So I wouldn't want to see, if we're trying to approve a site plan and not have problems that are resulting from that now or later on. These aren't things necessarily this board will be dealing with from a project management or cost perspective later on. So I just want to make sure that whatever we're doing there, we're not running into a problem where the building footprint is being drastically changed in some way that is just undoing. So if we could work out the site details there, again, I think there's definitely, to your point, the potential ability here to break off, in some way that portion of the project and review. There's certainly been a fair amount of debate around that structure, way more maybe in recent time than the park. And so perhaps it would make sense to do that. I can, circle back on that point with you prior to, August. But I would just, hopefully we could work out the site details enough in that area that it would not generally have to modify. Maybe the building footprint is shifting a little bit in that plaza, but maybe the other details don't have to be modified, like ramps, for accessibility and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If we get as far in the site plan with the footprint and the general outline of what's going to be in the visitor center, and then agree with the applicant that we put off the site plan, the special permit decision, and get the site plan wrapped up, they can move along. Obviously, they're not, if they're going to go out to bid, it's only going to be on the phases, the first phase anyway. So I think I wouldn't worry about all that right now. I'm glad we've had this conversation because it sets everybody's expectation about how we want to move this as efficiently as possible forward and work together on it. But we know we can already see what the stumbling blocks are going to be. And if we can pull out a later phase stumbling block for a later decision, then we'd be happy to work with the applicant to get the site plan approved and ready for bid.
Sure. So I will definitely circle back internally, and we'll have Sasaki and the team here and I will have having a meeting tomorrow morning anyway. So we'll circle back on this particular point, understand the board's concern. And obviously there'll perhaps we need to be some more coordination, determine what might be acceptable here. We'd love any additional feedback you want to provide, any members want to provide us, whether it's here in the meeting or you just want to give a call. Any additional feedback would be helpful to us, regardless of the time frame, involved, if we are breaking that off, certainly to get to the end result, whatever that design is that is acceptable to the boards.
I guess I'd just say, if the visitor center is the only thing that requires a deal with the special permit, then you don't actually have to file that application right away. You can file that application in a couple of months when you get a good sense of what the site plan is.
Yep.
Any other comments from any of the board members now? Because I think we've given you, the major concerns to think about. Other details may come up, or other maybe significant things may come up as we look in detail at the site plan. But I think we've got what we want to say right now to incorporate into the application. Yeah.
I think I heard Maren say that you're talking about 50 inches of sea level rise by 2070, and I've always thought of 40. So did I hear wrong?
Stephanie, did you hear that?
Yeah, no, that's correct. I know that the Conservation Commission requires looking at 40, but the more advanced data that we have actually models 50.
And that's great. And so one thing I would request, if it's possible, when you submit the plans, is to have an exhibit, a plan that shows perhaps the areas that are below and above the 12 feet plus 50 inches. Because as I read the plans, I don't see the plans, as I read the sketch, it seems like there are these rooms that are above, perhaps above the 50, but maybe the waves are below the 50. And I just want to get a sense of what the areas are that are going to be underwater when we have that 1% flood in 27.
Rick, just and for Stephanie's benefit and the Sasaki BHP team here, would it be, I know that we've done some in prior presentations and we have some slides to this, there are actually color illustrations of that. I'm wondering if that is actually even more useful than, say, a black and white line drawing. Does that work? Because Stephanie and the team, I think, have had some good renderings to show the sea level rise and what areas were captured at different points. And Stephanie, does that, and Maren, does that make sense?
Sure. We can provide images that are outputs of that model. What we don't have in there though is the the proposed grading overlaid with those plans. So we'll probably, we can create a compilation of different images to help clarify the degree to which the site will be protected.
Sorry, perhaps I'm misunderstanding because I'm recalling some renderings that are showing those areas, but it was based on, at least at that point, the grading as we knew it. Am I misunderstanding something here?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe we can figure that out with the team offline.
Sure. Yeah, it would take me a moment to pull up one of the renderings, but I think we have or had developed some of those. We can follow up on that tomorrow, but certainly understand what the need is.
Simplified, you've got the grading plan, you're gonna have the contour line.
Yeah.
We'll just be drawing, tracing that contour line,
Yeah.
which is 12 feet plus 50
Yeah.
inches. And showing what's inside, what's outside.
Okay, so in addition to anything we do in color or for the rendering side of it, if we could show maybe on a plan sheet, show that line type running through the site, so for a clear distinction, I guess. And Rick, is it acceptable or clear enough if we use one drawing sheet for that as opposed to the 4 tiles? Just because a lot of the planning sheets you're going to be seeing are in 4 tiles based on the site. So, okay. Does that make sense for the Stephanie and Maren?
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks the planning board for your time. I definitely appreciate tonight in advance of the hearing, and we'll follow up on the DOD end, and obviously the site plan will be before you regardless. So.
Okay, great, thank you. Look forward to seeing that.
And thanks everybody from Sasaki and VHB for being here tonight.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Minutes. Clarify this list here, it's incorrect. 5/4/22, there was no recording, and so from my minutes, I drew up some minutes, which I'll send to everybody tomorrow for review on August 17th. 5/18 have already been done, and we've approved them. And so that leaves us with 6/15, 6/22, and 7/6, and they are all ready for review. Does anyone have a problem if I take them all together?
I need to abstain from the 6/22.
If you weren't there, I'll ask you to abstain, and I'll try to keep track of all of it. Yeah, that's kind of difficult, isn't it? If you weren't there, no, we better take them separately. Does everybody remember whether or not they were at the meeting? Because they're gonna have to abstain if they weren't. All right, let me do 6/15 first. I'll take a motion to move Rick.
Second.
And I'm gonna assume everyone votes in favor of the minutes. Any abstentions? 6/15.
6:15, I have to abstain. I was not in attendance.
Okay. So abstain Richard on 6/15. Okay, here we go. 6/22. Moved. Second. Heather. Any abstentions?
Me.
And all else vote in favor.
Abstain as well. I was at a conference.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, 7/6, our last meeting. Let me have the motion first.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Heather gets it. Okay. All in favor except who needs to abstain? Nobody? We were all here?
Are we talking July 6th?
Yep.
I had COVID. Abstained.
You had COVID. Oh.
Very sick that day.
We're gonna see you in person next time, right?
That's right.
Yay! I won't be here, but I know what you look like. Can't get all of them in the room. Nothing. Okay, so those are all the minutes. Is there any update for you, Andy?
I don't think it's at the moment. We do have a zoning hearing we have to have. It's a relatively minor zoning amendment, but that'll be also on the August 17th meeting. Very quick with the city council, in my opinion, it'll be quick. It's a reduction of some of the dimensional standards, very minor tweak to the zoning relative to fire stations that the city is doing. We don't have many of those, but there's one of our city projects. We determined that variance would be needed for the project. And it's not clear that those dimensional standards are necessary to be so tight anyway. So the thought was to just amend them. So that's why you have the zoning amendment coming forward for that, but it's a very small amendment. We assume that'll be a very quick meeting with the city council. And we know that we expect them to be on board, given that it's based on, in part on a product they've already reviewed to some degree. So.
What's happening with STRUs?
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you for the report that you provided. That's been passed on to the council. I understand from the chair of the Planning and Development Committee, Ed Cameron, that he's planning on scheduling the meeting in the first or second week of August. Yeah, I know there's debate about maybe whether that could happen sooner, but I think he's planning on the first or second week of August with the hopes of, if there need to be follow-up meetings, getting a council action by the end of the month to ensure that that deadline is met. So last meeting in August, I guess, is the chair's hope or expectation of a vote by the council.
Anything else from anybody else? Don't see anything on the screen, so
We had a great first meeting of our ad hoc committee on waterfront west zoning last night. And making progress, and we'll have something by second.
good to know. Thank you. All right, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So
Alden, second? Second. Deb? Anybody opposed to adjourning? Oh. We want to take the vote. Lovely to see you guys up there. Hang in there. Hope you don't get it, Bob, and Richard, hope you're on the mend. Okay, everybody. 99.
Thank you.